Semunata, Atawena, Spanano di Koti Marame, I am gets us you better believe it.
She's on my mind. She's on my mind. You're on my mind. Oh, star child. She's on my mind. She's on my mind. Won't you come down? Oh, star child. Yeah, yeah. Drifting out of space. Check your time of day. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If I want you to be my lady, I'm gonna call you, call you lady, 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 lady. If I think you'll be my baby, I'm gonna shoot my shot and call you lady, 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 lady. If you're classy but you're reckless, then you gon' get choose a necklace, lady, 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 lady. She got me wondering if I should make her my baby, lady, lady. Shake some on my. Maybe I should say the things I type online, be like, baby. No, I can't. Yes, I can. Wait, I said I can feel it, you feel it, we feel it. I know she want me. Girl, you know I love ya. Happy to call you my lady, you're special. Happy that you're my baby. Happy to call you my lady, you're special. Happy that you're my baby. If you're classy but you're reckless, then you gon' get choose a necklace, lady, 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 lady. If you classy but you're reckless, then you gon' get choose a necklace, lady, 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 lady.
Yeah. Well, listen. Don't wanna keep talking with you.
Test. Hey, how are y'all doing tonight? Clap it up. What's up, y'all? My name is Unray Latil Watkins. I am the lead of public programs at the Arts and Industries Building. Give it up for me. Don't I look cute tonight? All right, I want to start out with something. I like to begin with the chant here at Futures. You'll learn it, remember it. Repeat after me. We rocks the party that rocks the party. Okay. Let's go back. All right, I need you to bring the energy. Okay, you ready? Here we go. Repeat after me. We rocks the party that rocks the party. Yeah, rocking the futures that we all dream. Again, we rocks the party that rocks the party. Yeah, rocking the futures that we all dream. Give it up for yourselves, y'all. call my panelists on stage, if y'all don't mind joining me on stage, you are getting ready to experience what we call We Interrupt Your Regularly Scheduled Panel. Here at oh, y'all want to clap? Go ahead. There you go. There you go. I want y'all to affirm our panelists as they come on stage, y'all. Go ahead and affirm them as they come on stage. Clap it up for them. Clap it up. Yes. So here at Futures, we have a panel experience entitled We Interrupt Your Regularly Scheduled Panel. And in this panel, you all are the ones that are going to be leading our conversation. You will be picking and choosing the panelists' talking points and questions that they will be answering. Does that sound good? Yeah, that sounds good. Yes. All right, cool. So I'm going to tell you all how this works. But first, let me go ahead and introduce our panelists. So first up, and this is my thing, I like to be able to allow the panelists to feel affirmed, to feel celebrated, to feel valued. So I want you to clap it up as I'm introducing them, okay? So first I have Isolde Brielmaier. Give it up, y'all. Woo! Yeah. Isolde is the newly appointed Deputy Director of the new museum as well as Curator at Large at the International Center for Photography in New York. She serves as editor-at-large at Air Mail, Graydon Carter's new media venture, along with several other art journals, and speaks regularly on topics related to art, culture, and social impact. Give it up for Isolde, y'all, our moderator. Up next, we have Amanda Pingbodipakia. Give it up, y'all. Amanda is a multidisciplinary artist, educator, and activist. As artist in residence with the NYC Commission on Human Rights, Amanda's art series celebrating the resilience of the AAPI community, I Still Believe in Our City, reached millions in New York City and worldwide through her Atlantic Terminal billboard, subway domination, and social media amplification. Give it up for Amanda, y'all. We also have Stephanie Dinkins. Give it up for Stephanie Dinkins, y'all. Yes, Stephanie is a transmedia artist who creates experiences that spark dialogue about race, gender, aging, and our future's history. Her work in AI and other mediums uses emerging technologies and social collaboration to work toward technological ecosystems based on care and social equity. Give it up, y'all. And last but not least, we have Suchi Reddy. Give it up for Suchi! Suchi is an architect and artist who founded her New York-based firm, Ready Made, with a focus on the emerging field of neuroaesthetics in 2002. She tackles issues of societal engagement using art and experience to create discourse around subjects with both local and global relevance. Give it up! All right, so as I mentioned earlier, you all are going to have the opportunity to interrupt this panel. So I need you to look at the back of your seats. For those of you who have a seat ahead of you, look at the back, look at the front of that seat. I need you to scan the QR code when we prompt you to scan the QR code. When you scan the QR code, you are going to be prompted to take a live poll. That live poll will have 2 questions that you will choose from. Whichever question has the most selections, that will be the question that our panelists will be answering. Does that sound good? Great. For those of you who are sitting in the front seat, you will be scanning the QR code that appears on the screen. Cool? Excellent. All right, cool. So I want to make sure that we shout out AWS, who is sponsoring this amazing program. Give it up for AWS, y'all, today. Amazon Web Services. And I also want to give it up for NBC, who is sponsoring our live stream tonight. Give it up for NBC, y'all. Excellent. So now that you all know how it works, let me go ahead and get my little booty off this stage so we can hear from our experts. Sounds good? Let me throw it over to Isolde.
Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. That was probably the liveliest introduction I've ever experienced. Thank you, Andre. I do want to take one moment to acknowledge the indigenous land upon which we stand. I think that's very, very important, right, before we begin. So thank you. Super excited. I'm going to start with, and I was teasing these 3 very, very highly fierce, intelligent, brilliant women. We're going to start with something that seems very basic, I think, to all of you, but it's always something that I'm curious, and I think our audience will be curious to kind of hear your thoughts on. And that is, number 1, why do you make art? And number 2, what communities or specifically audiences do you strive to engage and impact through your creative work? So I'm going to toss it all the way down the line to Suchi Reddy.
Wow, that's loud. Okay. Hi, everyone. I make art because I want to talk about our evolution as humans, both internally and as communities. Because I think if we don't understand our relationship to ourselves and to where we are and who we're with, we're not building a world that we want to be in. So that's really why I make art.
And I think one of the things that's really interesting, a kind of thread, that was not me, I don't think. A thread that runs through all of your work is that in a way, your work necessitates people to actually exist and be the work that it is, right? So that people, the engagement, viewers, visitors, audiences are so critical. Stephanie.
Yeah, I make art because I can, and it's the best way for me to, yeah, it's true, right? It's just the best way to get my thoughts out into the world, right? In a way that I feel I can reach and engage people in a way that's embodied. I'm really interested in having a relationship with folks through my work. And so I make art to express my thoughts. And the communities I'm trying to engage are really wide berth, right? So in some ways I want to talk to the people I live next to, my neighbors in Brooklyn, New York. And I do a lot of community work and workshops with them. But on other times, I'm standing on a stage in front of thousands of people. And I think that's just another community, and thinking about how we can all work together to kind of think about the world that we're creating and molding at the time is really important to me as well. So trying to get from my very next door neighbor to the president of Apple, maybe, to help us think about the world we're trying to build, or hopefully we're collaborating on.
And that's something else that sort of brings up. I mean, all of you are in one way or another using technology, which I think for those of us that are very literate and versed seem, maybe it appears to be second nature, but there is a lot of, sort of ambiguity, skepticism, cynicism around it. And I want to kind of get a little bit to that as well, because I think each of you tried to kind of peel back some of the layers on that. Mm-hmm. Amanda.
I make art to foster a sense of belonging. So my background is actually in neuroscience, and I did a lot of research in the lab before I became an artist. And one of the things that sort of stood out to me that really sort of was the seed of my practice was that a sense of belonging is absolutely crucial for our mental and physical well-being. It's something that we know deep down, sort of innately, but the research backs it up in the sense that when we feel isolated or alone or ostracized, our bodies actually react as if we had experienced physical harm. So sort of fostering this sense of belonging, helping folks know that there is space here for their voices, their stories, their history, and their dreams is something that I'm always trying to do with my work, whether it's on the side of a building or it's more participatory. That sort of impetus is always top of mind.
Right, that sort of invitation, I think. Okay, so that was sort of general, and I want to go to kind of more pointed questions for each of you. Suchi, I'm going to toss it to you again. Not that we're going to go 1, 2, 3 down the line, but just we'll go to you. So Me Plus You, the momentous installation project that is on view here at the Smithsonian, the Futures exhibition. I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit about the background of Me Plus You and why you chose to collect people's visions for the future. Because there's a lot of things that we could think about when we think about the future, but you really honed in on one particular question, and that forms the core of your work.
Well, it comes back to the question of why you make art, and part of it is to co-create, and really to think about who has a voice in the future. And the sculpture Me Plus You that you can see over there is really about representing everyone's voice, about giving everyone a place for their voice, for them to have the ability to have their voice reflected to them, and have all of our voices kind of come together in a communal vision so we understand how we're affecting everyone else around us. And to really have this kind of awareness about it, So the sculpture asks you, give me a word for your future. And usually when you ask someone that question, they stop to think. And for me, that's really the piece. That's the moment that really the work is about, is really giving someone that opportunity to be thoughtful, to be careful, to engage in a careful way with technology where it's actually mindful. Because I think if we do that, we have a great opportunity and a great chance to take all this amazing technology that's here and use it for everyone's benefit. If we don't, we might run into some problems. So that's really what the work's about.
And I love this sort of vacillation between the individual and the collective, right? Because the three of you each are your own individual artists, but at the same time, when we think about the future, it's really going to be, it is, and is going to be, if anything, in these last several years, right, that we've learned, it's the collective that's going to propel us forward, right, for the future. So this idea of one voice joining other voices to actually kind of make an imprint and impact, right, on how we envision the future.
And to also remember our individuality and diversity within that, and to be able to celebrate the diversity of everything that we contribute together to our communities, which, I've been hugely impressed with, both of my fellow panelists' work about that, where it's really about, let's look at all of us. There isn't any kind of, these issues of bias that you explore in your work, Stephanie, or, these other things that really are correcting, shall we say, or I'm saying correcting kind of like a photographer would, where you like rectify the frame, you kind of make it straight. And it's kind of like that, to be able to look at the world through that lens. And for me, that's what art does, is like kind of does that for you.
And this element of kind of thinking in pluralities. I mean, hence futures and not future, right? Great. Amanda, can you, and I don't even know how easy this is going to be because your work is so kind of multifaceted and so rich, so many layers, but I'm wondering if you can kind of break down the sort of general ingredients for me and for our live audience and our audience out there streaming in the world, the ingredients that go into kind of creating your multidisciplinary art experiences. I mean, do you have 2 or 3 or 4 kind of go-tos that you kind of always come, to the table with as you begin to kind of ideate?
Let me try. So thank you so much for picking up.
I thought that was an easy question.
Thank you so much for picking up on the multifaceted nature of my work. By design, it has so many access points because I think we can't, as humans and artists, expect everyone to be on the same page as us. I want to meet folks where they are. I want to sort of hold space for all of our voices. So when I think about my work, it always comes down to, first, what is the purpose? Am I trying to promote a sense of healing for our communities? Do I want to collect stories? Do I want to bring someone to a vastly different world? And by answering sort of the why, then I start to narrow down, okay, what is the technology that might be best suited for this particular piece? VR is so powerful because our brains don't know the difference between, what's in virtual reality and what is real life. So it will really kind of transport you. But with augmented reality, then you have the opportunity to sort of juxtapose this new layer of information and delight almost that can even also access just stories from others and have people participate. Or maybe it's just much simpler and more open and sort of inviting folks to just share how they feel or what they hope, much like you and me. So that's kind of how I begin. And from there forward, I'm just following an iterative process of trying to figure out, which direction might work best. And I'll test with folks. I think all of us probably have very iterative practices that allow people to engage with, maybe prototypes of ours. And then from there, there'll be sort of a final vision. But all that to say, I think creativity can sometimes take as long as it's given. So if we're on extreme deadline, well, it'll just happen faster.
Right. I love that. Creativity can take as long as it's given. I really like that. I'm going to use that one. Sorry, I need 6 hours for my creativity, and we're being interrupted by a very cool song. All right, encourage everybody to scan your barcodes. You are given an option of 2 questions. Which one will they choose?
Go, go, go. They said, hey, sugar, take a walk on the wild side. I said, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side.
Whoever put
All
together the
right.
playlist, I need it.
Pretty good.
Huh.
All right. The question selections are coming
Jackie
in.
is just
Can you hear me now?
away. Thought she was James Dean for a day. Then I guess she had to crash. Valium would have helped that patch. I said, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. I said, hey honey, take a walk on the wild side. And the colored girls say, do 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 do.
All right. It is heavily leaning towards question number 2. Are you all ready? And Stephanie, I'm going to throw this out to you. All of you can take it. One of you can take it. What tools will creatives use to make art in the next 1,000 years? So that means when you are 1,000 years old,
Yeah,
what will you be doing?
who knows, right? Right. I was thinking about this because I know that I want to start working with DNA now, right? So that means in 1,000 years, what'll I have access to, right? What can I talk to? What can I play with? And I have a feeling it would be so many more intricate, crazy things that we can do. Much more morphing of ourselves. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of self-morphing that we can play with and mold.
Can you define self-morphing?
Like taking my consciousness and having it live elsewhere.
Okay, because the audience is looking
Right.
both terrified and delighted.
Sorry, this is my imagination, right? But I am really thinking about in 1,000 years, maybe my consciousness can be here and really cognizantly in another place at the same time in another thing. Maybe we're dealing with our cellular level. Maybe we're playing more and more with the mycelium under us, right? Because we understand it so much better. I think things will be way more plastic and malleable and fun.
Wow.
I think Stephanie's really onto something, because at any time, we're always playing with the tools we have. What's the bucket? Which crayons are in the bucket that we're going to pull out? So part of actually what's so exciting about being in the show and seeing everything and thinking about the other ideas that everyone else in the world is coming up with is because it gives people like us fodder to work with. Whether it's the genome or it's the mycelium or it's our cells or it's our voices, or maybe we won't be doing any of this and we'll be playing with sticks and stones. I don't know. But whatever it is going to be, I think, something, or should be certainly something, if we have our way, that really allows us all to think about, what we do and how we do it and how it's affecting the person next to us.
Yeah, I think the element of possibility for me, and it connotes a sort of vastness, right? In terms of how all of us, you as artists, but how all of us, might exist and create, and ideate and engage. Amanda?
No,
1,000 years from now.
Well, this is so interesting because it's sort of looking into the future, but if we look 1,000 years into the past and look at the tools that we were using then, what were we making? We were making textiles, we were making paintings, we were making ways in which we could gather and record our stories, and we're still doing those same things today. And 1,000 years from now, like my fellow panelist said, who knows what the tools will be? And I think it matters less what the tools are, but more what we're doing with them. So are we, using these tools to divide, or are we using these tools to bring people together? And, I think we can all agree that technology is made by us, so then it's not neutral, right? It has the fingerprints of all of our biases. So that is something to consider. And, like Suchi said also, we might be playing with sticks and stones, especially if we don't take care of our planet and each other.
Very good point. I see a number of folks taking notes in the audience. I'm sure for all of you at home streaming, you're also taking notes. 1,000 years from now, we're asking you all to predict the future, and you've made some really, really great points. I am going to leave this interruption because I know we're going to have a few more from our boisterous audience members here, IRL and online. And Stephanie, I want to go back to you with, again, what for you will be a very basic question, but I'm very curious to hear how you're going to answer it. What is an algorithm in your mind? I know. But more importantly, why is it important for communities, for diverse communities, to understand how algorithms are created and how they're used? And what can that knowledge, how can that knowledge sort of be harnessed to build a more equitable future?
Wow, there are no easy questions here, right?
A super easy answer so everybody can write it down.
It's a really interesting question because I forget the answer all the time in some ways, right? So when I think about algorithms, I like to think of it in the simplest form and go, well, an algorithm is something that is a set of repeated steps, right? So every morning you brush your teeth, you probably don't think about what you're doing particularly, but there are a set of steps that you take to do that thing that probably happen in pretty much the same way, right? Go get your toothbrush, put paste on, do it, brush, brush, brush for 2 minutes, go. And that is kind of this algorithm that you run every day. Now, if you imagine much larger systems that start to have different kinds of decisions and much more consequential decisions within them, like medical decisions, right? And they're a set of steps that get checked off about how we decide who gets what kind of treatment, when, where, and how, right? And each of those steps goes through, like you could think about this in your doctor's hands. And I think about this a lot because I feel like I often don't get treatment that other people do. Or you can think of that as being something that is mechanized or computerized, right? And so those decisions get taken out of people's hands and put into a computer, but based on data and information that is historical. And I think about that in particular for communities, right? In terms of, well, if we're making systems and algorithms that make these decisions in the same way and over, and we're using information and data that is based on history, especially here in the United States, what does that bring us to, especially for communities of color? And as an example, you know, even when I'm doing the most menial tasks, using, you know, just language, right? A lot of folks use off-the-shelf kind of data sets, one being a Cornell movie data set. Pretty innocuous, kind of, but think about the history of movies in the United States and what folks of color look like in those movies and what positions and how they communicate. And when you're dealing with information, that's nothing I want to base any project I ever put out on. And so for me, it's both that algorithm that's making decisions and the sets of information that is fed to them. And getting folks involved, I hope, means getting different kinds of data that can be then run through these algorithms to help them decide in different ways and help them create in different ways.
Oh.
Then we
The song. Everyone knows what that means. Our audience, IRL and streaming. Pick your question. All right, we're leaning very heavily towards one question. It's a good one. I'm going to toss it, I think, first to Amanda, give folks a little bit longer. All right, question number 2. I think everybody likes even numbers here. Number 2, how will empathy and human emotion impact the future of artificial intelligence, AI?
You know, I think what's interesting about empathy and human emotion is it's what drives us to action. And, you know, if we're thinking about either inciting a riot or perhaps, you know, making marginalized voices heard, these are things that will sort of like feed into algorithms and feed into our technology to then sort of perpetuate these biases that exist in the world. So I think they're so important to building bridges across communities, communities of color especially, sort of standing against white supremacy. And I think if we don't sort of infuse enough of our technology with sort of empathy and compassion, we're going to really be in trouble.
Stephanie or Suchi? Either of you want to?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask you when you say you're working with art and technology and data, they want to know, how are you using this data? Where is this data coming from? And then it really got me thinking about how we actually look at data in our world. What are we using this data for? And it's amazing to say, yes, we're so data driven and, we're going to figure out how to solve all the problems through data. But I think one of the lenses that's the most important lens to view data through is the lens of empathy. If we're not looking through that particular lens, and because all data is information, so the perspective with which you're actually parsing that information, you're understanding it, and you're using it is the most important part of all of that. And I think empathy is the biggest thing that we need to bring to the data table. We have to be like, you can't be looking at all of this information if you're not looking at it to see how it can fulfill, everyone's need for empathy. Like, how is that doing it? And I think it's something that, I've stressed that every time I get a chance to speak out about data. So I'm just going to get on my soapbox right now again. But truly, I think it's one of the most important things we need to do going forward.
Great. I think, Stephanie, you want to sit that one out? Great. Okay. Two things. So we're talking about data, and then I'm thinking, going back to what Stephanie was saying, really just so eloquently kind of around this, what an algorithm is, and it can be so many things, clearly. And I have two very pointed questions. I have a feeling I'm going to be interrupted before I get to the second one. But the first one, if we think about, for each of you in your work, how do you integrate human experiences into each of your work without invading people's privacy, right? Or without, actually, I'm just going to leave it there. And privacy can mean a whole host of things. And maybe it's not specifically about your work, but this is obviously a topic that comes to mind when we start thinking about technology, and in particular, AI. Amanda, you want to take that one, or Stephanie? Do you have it?
Sure, I can start. So I think we should always be able to give consent for how our information and how our stories and experiences and, our work product are used. So I think in my work, I'm often sort of asking for a gift from the audiences that I engage with, or the communities that I'm engaging with. I'm sort of sharing my story and my history in hopes that it will inspire and encourage and invite others to do the same. But I'm always very clear in terms of how the stories will be used, where they'll show up, and in many cases, I choose to use just a sort of like a stand-in name, or perhaps an initial, just to protect folks' privacy. Because ultimately, when I'm often collecting stories, I find that I see so many of the same ones. I recently did an installation that held space for survivor stories, and it was absolutely heartbreaking to see the same story over and over again come through the internet and sort of like print in real time, live at this exhibition space. And I think that was also the power of it, that sometimes this anonymity sort of makes this whole collection of stories data, and it allows us to sort of parse through it and understand what we're seeing.
Great. Stephanie?
Yeah, I think that's really important, Amanda, right? This idea that we get to parse it and we have it. Like, I do similar work, right? So my project that's here, not the only one, it's my family's data. It's stories that we've told. It has some real things in it, but it's kind of hidden in plain sight. I don't think ever anybody gets to it. I've done another project called Binary Calculations Are Inadequate, which is also asking people to donate information, donate stories. And we chose donate very particularly because it is this gift that we're asking you to help us kind of build and draw pictures that are different than the ones that we have, and so that we can see the things that people have gone through and keep going, like the things we repeat constantly because we're unwilling to be open to what the possibility of many lives are. So I think that that's super important way to work. And also in binary calculations, we try to think about privacy and explaining to folks like what it actually means to give your data and why you should be both giving and concerned. And actually through the process of this app that we have, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, because as much as we're asking you to donate, we're saying, well, don't. Please do, but don't. But please do, but don't. And that's the struggle. But you know, people often do, and then we go to great lengths to, you know, disconnect the person from the data so that there isn't this direct way to come back. And also, we've then tried to make it so that you could have a receipt, so that if you've given us something, because we've had people give us personal information after we've said, please, you know, don't give us anything with, you know, identification, but they do. If you've submitted an image that identifies somebody you love and you don't want it, which they do, like we want to be able to give it back in the long run if somebody really wants it, but it's hard, right? Because then it's part of this whole data set and we're taking it apart. But I think it's important to do that work, but it takes a lot of effort and time and kind of parsing to try to get to it. But I think it's worth it in the long run, and I wish that lots of spaces would take that kind of care with the data.
I mean, this is just bouncing off that question from our audience around sort of empathy and the way in which we're now framing all of you, you know, the answers to the questions. You know, I love this notion of consent, right? And I love this notion of donate. And especially the idea of a gift, right? That when we as people offer up our information, right, our data, that it really is a gift. I think it's important to begin to kind of use that language, because language obviously is what gives, you know, us the ability to kind of, you know, pull meaning as we begin to reframe some of this.
I think this idea of generosity is so important, you know, because my work doesn't exist if somebody doesn't interact with it, if someone's not inhabiting the space, if someone's not talking to it. You know, it's a gift that both I give you and that you give me. And that act alone, if we can remember that, anytime we look at anything, any object, and look at it as a gift that someone's given you, and that your engagement, your understanding of that as a gift that you give forward, is such a beautiful way to look at the world, you know? And I think, and the self-awareness that comes with that, I think is something that is really, really important to think about. Because privacy, yeah, everyone, you know, if you looked at our world just at a quick glance, you'd be like, does anybody care about their privacy? They're just sort of, you know, giving it all up. But are they really? You know, are they really thinking about where that's going? Are they thinking about what they want to achieve with it? You know, what level of honesty is there in that transaction? I think these are things that truly we should be thinking about.
You know, speaking, and I heard, we probably only have 1 minute, so I'll just maybe throw out a thought before we're interrupted again. But speaking of gifts, I actually want to come back to the three of you and sort of the gift that you are to this field of sort of art, technology, design, creativity, particularly as women, right? And very specifically as women of color, since the four of us fierce people are happy to sit on the stage. So I want you all to kind of just think about that, because I'd love to kind of get a little bit at the state of women in this space of AI and AR today, and maybe even more specifically women of color, and then talk a little bit about some strategies in terms of how to increase representation. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Perfect, right on cue. Okay, audience members, in real life, streaming, code. We have some great questions here. Ooh, this one's a close call. Give everybody a little bit longer. It's a close call. Okay. They're battling it out. The questions are battling out, and we're landing again on number 2 because all of you love even numbers. So the question is, and Stephanie, you touched on this a little bit, but this is just very blunt. Are algorithms helping or harming our society's efforts to achieve an inclusive and equitable future? And maybe we really, I know. It's a hot one. Maybe we just situate ourselves in the here and now, and we think about kind of the conversation swirling around us just publicly in terms of the way in which folks are really critiquing the state of algorithms at the moment. Who wants to grab that one? Stephanie.
Stephanie is grabbing that one?
Yeah, do you think in this moment, I think you're doing some of the work to kind of improve, expand, and further, but in this moment?
Again, this is one of those crazy, it's really hard, right? Because, there are pros and cons on both sides. People are being cured quickly and more precisely than ever because of algorithms. People are being incarcerated for longer times.
Hello.
Right? Just because what they look like, where their zip code is, right? Because of algorithms. But when you work with them, when you play with them and you see, right, you think about, well, what is this? This is a mirror of us and the way we're making these decisions, right? And so whether they are or not, for me, isn't quite the question. It's like, how do we want to guide them becomes the question.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I think the question of human agency, of who's actually, again, looking at this information, who's designing this algorithm. The algorithm is not designing itself. It might develop based on the information that you feed it, but you're setting that course. I think it all comes back to really thinking about our role in all of this.
And to what end?
Exactly, and to what end? And what are we mirroring? Really, what are we mirroring?
Yeah.
We really want to think about that before we, say, it's so true, and particularly being in this museum that's been like, the history of humans and technology and how we've evolved as a culture to really think about how technology's actually helped us to get to a lot of places, whether it's the moon or inside ourselves, to help a lot of people. That's happened. All the other horrible things have happened too. So we really have to think about, we're making both of those things happen. So where do we want to be on that scale is really, I think, how you design an algorithm. There should be like a, how do you design an algorithm class somewhere, right?
No, absolutely.
That looks at it that way.
Actually. That's a really good
We
point.
have such responsibility as algorithms teachers, right? So I think just broadly also more education around the ways in which we are shaping algorithms and sort of introducing, shaping algorithms in ways in which we want to see that will benefit our shared futures will be, I think, just a benefit to society. But of course, that kind of education is very difficult. It takes a lot of on-the-ground work. Oftentimes, funding structures aren't in place to incentivize and encourage folks to do that kind of work. So I think that's something we need to address and focus on as well.
Yeah, I love, Stephanie, that you set up in a very accessible way this sort of dichotomy. On the one hand, there's healing potential, and then on the other hand, we're locking folks, particularly Black and brown folks, up at an alarming rate, actually probably at the fastest rate of any country in the world. And so right now, kind of living in the gray, in that in-between space, and harnessing, what you, Stephanie, actually what all three of you are saying in terms of thinking about agency and our role, right? It's not just this thing out there. It's people generated, and it's not just this thing out there that is sort of doing something to us, but rather we have some agency, and there is a role or sort of a way to kind of insert ourselves and make an impact. There.
Yeah, and I would say the push towards capital, right? Well, because most of what we develop, we're developing super quickly for money's sake. And people use shorthand or what's available to do it, as opposed to trying to be inventive, and start to reinvent and re-educate, right? Because I agree with you on education. I think we need to start pulling it back in a big way and really teach people to be critical thinkers in a slow, deliberate way so that they actually have a chance to do that work. But I'm working with some folks now who work in like really big tech, and their impetus is let's get it done, not let's think about what's happening when we get it done in the way that we're doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, similar to oil and gas, this is why we have algorithms, because they make it easier for us. They make money. And obviously they can do such good, but also incredible harm.
Yeah. Very well put.
I think there is something there, though, Stephanie, that you touched on, which is about this kind of talking between disciplines. You know, because we, you know, at the risk of sounding Pollyanna-ish about saying, yeah, well, you know, you got to do everything from the right place. You know, things are being done from, quote unquote, the wrong place for reasons. And those reasons are mirrored in different structures in society, you know, different structures within disciplines, you know, who needs to make money and how. And if we can all really talk to each other or bring all of those people together somehow, then maybe we can have even a conversation about it. And it might take some time to change, but we should be able to do it, you know?
So speaking of impact and change, I want to go back to the question really that you know, is oriented towards the state of women in, and maybe specifically women of color, since we all happen to be, the state of women in AI and AR today. And really thinking about what, and I imagine that it's not a fantastical, fabulous state, but really also thinking about the strategies that we can sort of utilize and even exhaust to increase representation of women, people of color, other marginalized communities within these fields, within this space. So Stephanie, for example, you said that you're working with big tech, right? You're doing responsible tech with big tech.
Trying.
But, you know, what is, you know, from that vantage point, what are you seeing? And, you know, are there entry points that are beginning to kind of open up?
Yeah, I'm gonna go every time you're asking the crazy big questions, because I think that women of color are doing the work, right? There are women of color out there, Black women in particular, who are putting it all on the line, who are getting fired, leaving, right, writing the books, doing the work. And it's interesting because everybody's tired and overworked, right? But everyone also has this conviction that this is a place that we really need to be thinking about and working, and it's worth putting ourselves on the line for. And so it's interesting to me because I think, well, yeah, I'm working with people in big tech, and they are folks of color, but they're also very well trained, right? And they're very well trained in universities that are teaching them the same way of thinking. So I'm always like, I say, you know, I'm a photographer by training, I'm not a technologist. And I say I'm a tinkerer in the space that I'm in. And I think that more of us need to be tinkering. And as you tinker, any expertise, if I have any that I have, it's because I've just been playing with algorithms that I've pulled off of GitHub, or then playing with algorithms that I've pulled from different places, and then deciding that I need a different data set, which means then I need to figure out how I make a data set so that I can feed the thing, but it all takes a lot of effort and a really long time. But then saying to other folks, hey, if I can do this, you can do it. And I encourage folks to find the thing that they're super interested in, to kind of get them there, because I deal with my family and my family's history, because it's something I've always wanted to do, and I know I'll dedicate enough time and energy to that effort to bring it forward, right? And so I say, hey, find the thing that you're interested in. I've worked with some kids. It's like, how do we make a chatbot speak patois, right? There isn't a data set for that, but we can phonetically do it. So we started working on that, right? And you know, give people the first steps and then get them impassioned about it is something I feel to be really important.
That is officially a New Year's resolution for all of you in our audience, both live and virtual. Be a tinkerer this year. I want each and every one of you to tinker. Such a great, I love that notion of tinker. Venture into something uncomfortable and unknown and tinker.
Yeah, craft and tinkering. It's not a big deal. You can do it.
All right, another interruption. So, all of you get those barcodes going.
While we
We have
dance.
2 questions. Let's see where we're at. All right. It's a heavy leaning. Which one is it going to land on?
Take it.
All right. So, we have landed on a question. This is a really good one, actually. Actually, all of you who leaned on this question stole my thunder. My concluding thunder. So make it good, the 3 of you. In a world of limitless imagination, describe your future dream project. So I can only imagine Stephanie has a big old DNA on her forehead here.
I do.
Amanda, do you want a dream project? And if you don't want to put it all out there, you can just give us a few hints.
No, I am a big believer of speaking it out into the world.
Put it out, call it out to the universe.
So a dream project of mine is to create a platform that allows for remix or blackout poetry and sort of taking old documents, historical documents that, are found in Smithsonian's archives or even the Library of Congress, and sort of drawing new meaning from old texts. I think, it enables fresh voices to have sort of a way to speak about their present truths in light of sort of the past. And yeah, I would love to make that.
Wow. Okay. That was very well thought out. Do you have that written in a proposal?
Oh yeah, it's very long.
I was like, that was really well thought out. If you asked me, I'd have to kind of head scratch and rub my chin. And Suchi, future project.
I've got so many. I was like,
Okay.
Which one do I choose to talk about? But really, I think it would be trying to make a space, physical or digital, possibly both, that can reach the most number of people that I can possibly reach in the world who would come in there and feel like it's their own. To really understand what that is, that sense of having a space that is your own, that you belong to, but have that really be that universal. I really want to find that way of overcoming the kind of divisions that I see forming in people, or really to understand as humans what is that and how can we kind of get past that. So yeah, I'm tinkering with physical digital mixes. Those are my favorite projects now.
Okay. And Stephanie?
Yeah, so my project, the thing that I'm thinking about now is how I make a forest that is imbued with the DNA of my family and our stories that is retrievable, right? So DNA storage is possible. Retrieving things back is not quite great yet, but I want to be able to imbue a forest with our stories and allow people to add to those stories and then allow them to, so we're kind of in similar space.
So amazing.
Right?
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Where would this forest live exactly?
Well, this is a really good question. I don't know yet. It's clearly
it's the future.
Yeah, it's the future in a plot of land.
We're all going to
whether
this
that's
forest.
institutional land or not, right? Becomes a question. And, yeah.
Okay, interesting. All right. So just to finish up really quickly with that last question, actually, you know what? I'm going to move on because I think we actually addressed, Stephanie did a great job of addressing sort of where women are at and what we can do to kind of push a bit. When you envision, or how do you envision art and design and technology impacting museums, schools, community organizations, spaces, cultural spaces? I'm not going to say over the next 100 years, because now we've already done 1,000 years and way into the future, but even over the next decade. Any thoughts on that? When we think about spaces that less private, right? That tend to be for, kind of, even like this, right? For community building, gathering, engagement, museums, schools, community organizations. Any thoughts on how, and maybe you speak personally based on your work, on how you see art, design, technology impacting, infiltrating, intervening, enhancing?
I can start with that because I think about this all the time. And it's really about how spaces and experiences are affecting you. How are they changing your brain, your body, your DNA? Because we're changing everybody as we're sitting here, talking to each other. And we're constantly doing this now in a very increased way, both physically and digitally. And how we inhabit digital space is as important to our emotional well-being as it is in terms of how we're inhabiting this space. And we've got to really understand that. I feel like, it's the Wild West and everyone's sort of, willy-nilly off on their horses until we don't know where we've ended up. And we're kind of, I don't want to be in that place. So at least it's my hope that in the next 10 years, really thinking about the effect that experiences and spaces have on us, both from a neuroscience perspective, from just a physical health perspective, from an emotional well-being perspective and connectivity perspective, should be what everybody's focused on. And I think we're getting there. I think the last 2 years kind of gave that a little bit of a fast forward into really thinking about how everything affects us, given that we've been stuck in spaces and not knowing, how to cope with that really. So I think some strategies are coming out of it that will be very, very useful. But, yeah.
Great. Amanda, do you have thoughts?
I think that institutions sometimes have colonial...
You'll want to hold the mic as close.
Yes, sorry. Have colonial beginnings, and I think as artists of color, it often falls on us to sort of be the change and create the changes that need to happen, which sometimes results in sort of exploitative systems that we have to navigate. So I think I've just been incredibly heartened by the incredible work that I've seen other creatives of color putting forth despite these challenges and really moving things forward, really expanding who gets to show at these institutions, who belongs in these spaces, and who gets to participate in the experiences that we put out there.
Great. Stephanie, did you have thoughts? Or?
Yeah, I have plenty of thoughts on this.
Sure
I have
you
plenty
do.
of thoughts. So if the last 8 years and sort of my trajectory in terms of being public has been 8 years, right? It's shown me anything. It's that an individual can kind of take action, do what they do, believe in it, and talk to others, and make ways that either show something, like I feel like I'm always, modeling something that maybe somebody might see and pick up and go. But I also feel like my presence in a big tech company when I'm an artist in residence there is both something to help people think different, but even my being is a challenge. And then when they figure out that I'm doing the same work they're doing, it's a really big challenge, because a lot of times I've been told, oh, you're nuts, you can't do what you're trying to do. But then they see I'm doing it, so they can't just sit on what they know is able to be done. And I've been really a great proponent of, well, let's figure out for each of us what it is that we feel like within ourselves are our greatest hopes, dreams, and desires, like beyond all the stuff that we have to fight against and try to build towards, but what do you actually want to build, and give into that and build it, and then try to find a voice for it. And because of social media and the ways that things happen these days, there are possibilities of things going places. Like, I'm here because of an image. Like, there's no doubt about it in my mind. It's a meme that I'm here because of. And it just set off a trajectory, right? And so that's after, and I will say that's after 20 years of trying and doing things, right? But there's a point at which things catch up to each other. And it's kind of a magical thought. So I kind of encourage people to believe in their desires, their wishes, and what the trajectories they hope for the world, and then really work for them. Because without action, it doesn't work. But if you're dreaming and making, then I think we get something that's really interesting.
That's such a nice note to end on. Is that another interruption? Oh, wait a minute. Is it a big interruption?
Thank you all.
Oh,
Yes.
great.
So this is the end of
This is the
our panel
ending
conversation.
interruption.
The big interruption. Thank you to our panelists and to our audience. You guys have been such a tremendous help with just providing guidance for this conversation. And can we clap it up for everyone in the room, actually? Yes, you all gave amazing answers. Yes. So thank you all for participating tonight, but we do have one more interruption. If you could scan the QR code one last time, and we just want to know, how do you feel about the panel tonight? With one word, we'll create a word cloud. Yes, please dance. Oh wow, I see inspiring, enlightening. You guys have been amazing, and thank you to our online participants as well. This looks amazing. This makes my heart sing.
So great. Really wonderful.
I love a good word.
Thank you all, beautiful people, for being here with us.
Thank you again, and thank you to Comcast for sponsoring our live stream, as well as AWS for sponsoring this panel. Make sure you guys stay safe tonight and get home safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Choices that he has to choose from, he's who learns. Are they determined by the color of his skin? Or do we take the time to see what lies within?